Boom guys, listen, we're back. Today I'm going to show you something that's super important for when you're doing any sort of lower back work or back work in general, especially when it comes to your rows and your deadlifts, of course. Your good mornings, if you're doing good mornings, right? Any sort of like RDLs, anything, right, for hamstrings, for lower back stuff. I'm going to show you essentially what this is, because I see a lot of people are missing this. And it's not as easy as it looks, but it's, at the same time it kind of is. And so what we're talking about is hinging at the hips. This is a very common mistake. And what you're essentially doing, if you're not hinging at the hips, is essentially you're putting a lot of strain on your lower back, which is essentially what's going to happen, or your quads if you're doing it too much. Which essentially what happens when you do that is you overload your lower back, so that's where you get the pump, that's where you get most stimuli, or you overload your quads, and that's what's going to fatigue before you can even get to the back work, right? So how do we, what is this hinging thing, right? So I want you guys to imagine, just like, if you look at it from like a profile here, imagine like a rod going straight through your hip bones, a metal rod, right? I want you to imagine that. And what we're going to do essentially, we're just going to not lean here, because what happens if we don't hinge at the hips is that we get the rod basically here. This is going to be the thing that bends, and that's going to create pressure on the lower back, right? So what we do is, I'm going to pull up my shorts here just so you can show, I can see the most, right? What we do is essentially, you basically just lower, you relax the knees a bit. And what that does is, when you lean forward, right, you push back with your hips a bit, that creates a load on the hamstrings. And so the hamstring is what we want to load. We don't want to load the quads too much, right? Because if we do this, we're essentially just quarter squatting, and that's putting the load on our quads. We can still do some stuff here, but it's going to make our quads take all the load. And if we don't do it, we do this, now our lower back is exposed. So the way we go about it then is we have just a slight bend, and so this is something you can practice, because as you move forward, you want to feel like a stretch down here in the hamstrings, a stretch, okay? And if you do this and you look in the mirror, maybe you have some good lighting going, then you can actually see like your hamstrings, the fibers activating and flexing. So once you do this, right, bend a little bit. And here, we're in a really good position to not just be safe, but also get a lot of weight going. And that's like intensity, or weight in this case, is the main driver for strength. So if we really want to get strong, then we need to do this. And also volume, since that's the main driver for hypertrophy, we want to do the most reps, the most sets that we can. And in order for that to happen, in order for us to see growth then we have to do the movement properly. If we don't, we're going to see the fatigues happen somewhere else. And so let's say we're trying to focus on building a big, nice, wide back, right? Then we're missing out on key elements to what actually creates growth. So I'll show you guys what this looks like with a standard. This is like I just picked something up, right? This thing actually annoys me quite a bit, because maybe you guys can see my hips, but I want to show you regardless. So I'm standing here, right? This is the difficult one. Using a barbell or any bar like this, that's the difficult part, right? So we have this in front of us. We're essentially just going to slightly bend at the knees and just like that. And the bar path is just straight down. This is like for a typical deadlift, right? You have the or like an RDL, this is what you do. You essentially just hinge at the or bend the knees, and then you push back with your hips a bit, and that's going to create strain in the hamstring. Then again, but we're in a really good position here. So that looks like this, right? Boom, just like that. And we can keep a really nice position, because we don't want to arch our back, right? Or we don't want to, have the back around, right? We want neutral back. That's what we are essentially doing with this. So I'm going to show you why. This is what my advice is though for people, because using a bar like this is, I won't say it's advanced, but using dumbbells is much more effective, especially in the beginning. Especially if you don't have this locked in, then I would use dumbbells, and I'll show you why in a second. So I picked these up, right? And so what happens when we're using the dumbbells instead is that we're not locked into position here. And so with the dumbbells, we have much more freedom of movement, although it is a different type of movement, but at the same time it's not, right, really, but we're just using different tools. This allows us to just focus on that and get into proper position without being locked in place like this. Because when it comes to this movement, right, we want our chest to be up, but not too much up, so we get the hyperextension, because that creates a flexion in our spine. But we also don't want, bad posture, right? Because that's going to create rounding. So you want a good middle ground. And a good way to establish that middle ground is without the deflection or the rounding happening, is with dumbbells. So I tell people all the time, use dumbbells instead of the bar. When it comes to like either starting out with deadlifts, fixing your form for deadlifts, RDLs, Romanian deadlifts, if you don't know what it is, basically just not touching the ground. So you're basically just going here. Right? So that it's just easier to get the movement going, I think. And really just focusing on that hip, because that's really what this movement is all about. The deadlift, the RDLs, everything is hip related. It's not bar related. It's not like the bar path itself, when it comes to the lift, that fixes itself once the hips are on point. Because what the hips do essentially is, and a lot of people who talk about this too, they say that the deadlift is not a pull, it's a push. And it's true after a certain point, right? So once you come off the ground, right? This is not a deadlift tutorial. Maybe I'll make that if you're further down the line. If you want that, comment below. But essentially, once we're coming up here to the knees, we're just pushing in the hips. And so we don't need to worry about bar path, essentially. Because as long as it's straight here, then everything will be sorted out. We're not pulling the bar towards our hips, we're actually just pushing the hips into it, right? Imagine this movement. Maybe you're familiar with it, maybe not, but regardless, that's essentially what we're doing. So everything stems from the hips. Hips don't lie, like Shakira says, right? So just getting good at this movement is really important. And it's not just good for like just strength, just growth in the proper muscles, and the mind muscle connection, everything. It's like an explosive thing, because this, right, it comes into this play in the squat as well. Everything is this movement, hip thrusts, right? But that hip thrust, for that to happen, we need a slight bend in the knees, and that's why we need to get that hinge sorted solidly. So just this position should be really stable for anyone, with the hamstrings nicely activated and the hips doing a lot of the work, so that the muscles can focus on their job, right? For a row, it will look like this, right? You bend slightly and not too much, because if you bend too much, now we're getting quad activation, and they're going to take up for a lot of the weight. This is very common with heavy rows, and that is okay to like a certain extent, because we want to, that's like a different way of going about it. But let's say if we set a baseline for what that's supposed to look like, essentially what that is here, slight bend in the knees, a hinge at the hips, and then just, and like you see, I mean, I use a bit of momentum, but it's not like the quads are taking up, it's just a bit of a stretch, kind of like a plyometric in a way. So here, boom, 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 right. But that's why this hinge is super important, just for safety, for everything. It's going to give you a lot. If you don't know how to do it, you need to practice it, because once the lift comes, that needs to be on point. And it's not difficult to get down, it's just that it's important to recognize, hey, am I hinging or not? Because if you're not, then you're going to lose the hamstring activation, and you're going to end up in a position that's not beneficial. So That's what we want to do. I think that's it for this one. If you guys want to see more like this, just maybe more advanced stuff, hit me up in the comments below. Make sure, guys, to subscribe to the channel, okay? I got a lot more stuff coming. Like the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care, and God bless. Boom!